we would have a conversation, a lot of times I would revert back and I said, I asked you if you were using or if you were using drugs, and you told me no, and you knew that I didn't do that. You knew I had a daughter. Why would you do that? All he would say was, I'm sorry. And I'm like, but look what's happened.
Let's be honest about recovery.
The rewards, the challenges.
Let's talk about our failures.
We are flawed people, after all.
Let's challenge the stigmas that weigh us down.
Because while most of us are looked at,
few of us are seen.
Let's talk about addiction.
And how Christ overcomes our weaknesses.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
Because we are loved.
We are loved.
We are
Because
loved.
we are loved.
My name is Amanda Graham, and I'm here to tell my side of addiction. I was not in addiction, but I did deal with the codependency, the family struggles, and feeling like I had no voice was a real issue. And I hope that somebody can see this podcast and know that they have a voice.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Jesus Loves Addicts. I am really looking forward to this episode. We have talked about and had some people on in the past, but maybe not as many as we would have liked. Certainly not as many as we would have liked. That tells this side of the story. So with every addict story, there are people in that orbit, people in their lives that aren't being so much talked about, that aren't getting to tell their story. And so we want to make a platform for that as well. And today we are blessed to have Miss Amanda Graham on the show to tell us exactly that side of it. She herself did not battle addiction, but she did battle life with an addict. And so I just want to say, too, that it's such a wonderful insight, if wonderful can be used there, into the scars that it leaves on the people around us. I really just want to say that I know this may sound, well, however it may sound, but I'm super proud of you, Amanda, for being on here, because I know this is an emotional high hurdle for you. And I can't wait to dive into your story, right? Because it's meaningful, and it's kind of what we were talking about. Your story matters, and this side of it needs to be told. And so, but just like with the addicts, your story, Amanda's story, doesn't start when you got into that relationship. Where does your story start? Can you tell us a little bit about what did home life look for you growing up? What was that picture?
So I had I would consider a very normal childhood. My parents were divorced. My dad, living with my dad, that was my normal. My mom, that household or, home atmosphere was a little toxic. So there was a very night and day as far as the two households were concerned. I wasn't, raised around, to my knowledge, any type of drug use, certainly not on my dad's side. Later in life, I did find out that there were some issues, maybe related to my mom and my stepdad's household there. But growing up, I didn't know. We didn't know.
Did you live full-time with your dad, or primarily?
So we, me and my brother were kind of back and forth between our parents, which hindsight, I wish that wouldn't have been allowed, so much allowed. And, there may be times where I had gotten in trouble and like, oh, I'm going to go live with my dad, or,
right.
And vice versa. But it was pretty much a split.
You mentioned one of the households feeling kind of toxic. What do you mean? What was the toxicity? Because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
Physical abuse, that we were kind of exposed to between mom and stepdad.
So you witnessed him?
Yeah, sometimes, and there was just that household was more should I say, so my stepdad owned his own business. And so there was, a much higher income, base in that household. And so there was a lot of things that may have been, going on or that was accepted or, whereas my dad, that household was more, quality time. It was more, if I didn't have that, I most certainly don't, I think that was like my saving grace.
Your dad's home.
Yes.
So your dad's home was more stable emotionally.
Yes.
And when you say, it sounds like the stepfather made a lot of money, would you say that because of that, did your mom kind of overlook some things and maybe stay longer than she should have kind of thing because it was financially stable?
Absolutely. Because in all, she ended up having 4 children. And, with things that would go on, I remember just being a young girl. And she, we were at a restaurant, me and my brother at the time, and she was like, I'm going to get us out of here. And then, and as a child, you're like, you feel whatever situation we're in, if your mom's saying, I got to get us out of here.
You're scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was beyond the ability for her to pretend everything was okay. She was actually telling you guys there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to.
Yeah. And then, her and my stepdad separated, but it was like the craziness of him following us, following her, them getting back together.
And the other 2, your half siblings are your mom and your stepdad's?
Correct. Yeah. And so, dealing with that, like the chaos of kind of that, again, my dad was that steady, I knew I was safe. He was like, that was my safe place.
Did your stepfather, was he an addict? Did he use? Was he abusing?
If he was when we were kids, I didn't know it until I was an adult, and then looking back, or maybe
the behaviors.
Or having a conversation with other people, and it was like everybody knew, but me, and it wasn't like drugs were out in the house or on the counters. Like we had it was normal, other than, there was fights here and there, or, sometimes you just feel things aren't right.
Well, I think children know inherently when they're not safe.
Yes.
Well, and it's interesting too that you use this word normal, right? You said it was normal.
Yes.
Which speaks a lot to what's coming, right? Because it's how we perceive that word that sets us up for some future decisions, right? So for you, some people listening to this are thinking, gosh, that doesn't sound normal at all, right? The things you witnessed, the thing that's were happening. But for you, it was normal.
It was.
And so it does kind of set that stage for unhealthy choices, right?
Right. And so just 2 things I want to touch on that I feel were points, that probably drastically affected how the outcome of my adult life had went. But very early on, when I was in high school, and I'm going to back up just a second here because I do love my stepdad. And he knows, things right and wrong, and he had his issues, and then it came out later, as my other siblings were older as well, and he did have some drug problems, but bless him now. Yeah, he's actually has dementia, and so my sister cares for him full time, and I have no ill will against him. Like, that's what it was. It's over. We moved on from that, right? So, but at the time when I was in high school, I remember being a senior, and I was at his business, and I forget, I don't know, it was, I want to say he asked me to do something there, and I was like, yeah, I'm not, or I didn't agree to it, or whatever it was. Probably doing some type of work or something. And to be honest, it's really just a vague, most of it's just, a blur. But what came of that is that, him and I had gotten physical, and the police were called, and they came and they took me, and they took me to the juvenile facility. They took him to jail. And, I felt very betrayed because I was sent there, but my mom wasn't there.
Wasn't where at this?
Like, she didn't come check on me. Like, she took his side.
Okay.
Do you, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask something here, and maybe you don't know. Do you think she took his side, or was she stuck in her own silence and fear?
Very well could have been, you know. But my dad was there.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm going to get you out of here.
Yeah.
You know. And so he knew that, you know, whatever that was, he didn't care that I was in a juvenile office. He knew I was a good kid.
Yeah.
You know, he was like, you know, whatever. You know, I wasn't just going to act out some kind of
what
way.
had happened was out of character for you.
So, and I want to, you know, go back. I love my mom. I love, you know, I love her now, but I think a lot of the issues with her is that she was never healed from the beginning.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, she was there. She was our mom, but maybe not so motherly, you know.
What a great way to put that.
And how can she take care of us when she's, you know, she can't take care
of herself?
That's right.
You know. That's
right. And, you know, Amanda, I appreciate you saying that. And please know that we completely understand that this isn't about demonizing the brokenness in others. It's about telling the true story. I have no doubt that they are not bad or evil people, but as all of us are prone to really kind of bad, we can be bad people. We can be bad parents. We can be bad friends. We can be bad spouses, right? We're just, man, this flesh stuff is ugly. And sadly, you experienced that side of them as they went through kind of a really demonstrative time of their brokenness, right?
I definitely feel, you know, my mom had some issues that she couldn't deal with or didn't know how to deal with. And then she was, you know, at the time in that toxic relationship. And, you know, I think it was both of them just kind of being toxic together.
Did she come from a chaotic household? Do you know?
I don't know a lot about my mom's family history, but I feel as if she did.
Yeah.
But she's very private.
Yeah.
So she doesn't share a lot of that, but if I had to guess that there's definitely...
She sought out what was familiar for her.
Yes. And, but growing up and seeing, I must see as like, she felt like she was stuck, right? And I was like, I don't ever want that.
Yeah.
I never want that. And I'm going to make sure of it. So as I'm planning goals and things in my life, like there's just like very specific things, right? That
you will and will not do and tolerate.
And so there was also, and I forget about this too, that I feel like is a major part of kind of where things had led. Like at 16, I was on my own. I had my own apartment. I can't remember how was I paying for it? I don't know. I don't, you know, me and my brother, and not because like we were, you know, bad kids or anything. It was just circumstances that we were kind of put in. We were living with Dad at the time, and there was just some personal things going on there. And so, you know, being 16, driving myself to school, getting myself up for school when I could have not. I didn't, nobody telling me.
Yeah.
And finishing school and graduating with honors, not being pregnant, not being on any type of drugs or anything like that. And again, I was never exposed to drugs growing up as a child. Like nobody had a conversation with me other than school, what we learned in school. And I feel like I can honestly say that I was kind of sheltered from it, even though I had that toxic, you know, the toxic things going on.
Well, I'm sure that you had to have known other people that did it at school, and sometimes that comes to an awareness.
To be honest, I didn't.
That wasn't your crowd.
No.
Yeah.
You know, of course I knew what weed was.
Right.
Like, but no one had ever offered it to me. Nobody put it in my face. I never, did I drink some growing up? Yeah, absolutely. But
did you have close friends?
Yeah, I played softball in high school, things like that. But never did I ever have a desire. I think even if somebody was to say, try, like my dad instilled in me enough that I absolutely knew, no, I'm not doing that.
Well, I think the lines between groups in high school now are much more blurred today than they were decades ago. And so it was possible decades ago to be in a different crowd where you weren't inundated with that, whereas now it seems to have bled over things. But let me ask you something, Kathryn, kind of loosely for people listening. There was kind of a lighthearted joke about being a perfectionist before we got started, right?
Yeah.
But do you think that because of, I'll call it chaos. That's probably a too strong a word, but it's a little bit chaotic, right? Bouncing from home to home. One home is less stable than the other. There's a bit of chaos going on. Do you think that you became a bit of a performer? Do you think that your desire was to try and make things okay by being okay?
No, I didn't feel the pressure, I guess what you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that it was always important to me, and still to this day, to any decision that I've ever made in my, going into adulthood, I've always just in the back of my mind, would my dad be okay with it? Is this acceptable?
So there is a bit of an approval-seeking piece there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't know why it was so much from my dad. I mean, everything, because he was such a influence in my life that, and again, he was my safe place.
Yeah.
My stepmom, she's amazing. Like, it was coming home from school. We had home cooked meals. We were going to church.
Structure, routine.
We were playing. So it was stability, routine. And even to this day, my dad, he knows how to do everything. And so I expect everyone to know how to do everything, And so my expectations are very high with that, because that's just what I was raised around, that kind of man.
Yeah. Well, so that's interesting, knowing what's coming, right? So since we're kind of looking at that, it is very easy to see where the roots of your codependency began, right? And that kind of, again, the chaos, maybe, but that dysfunction that was certainly there, and you're bouncing. Did you date in high school? Did you have a boyfriend? What did your early relationships look like?
I did. I had a pretty steady boyfriend in high school. I guess you could say, my high school sweetheart. And so that was, a consistent 3 years, the same guy. And matter of fact, he was the one that I had the little apartment with. But I think that he may have had some home life that wasn't maybe so great as well. But yeah, we were, he had dropped out of high school, and if I was by my dad, he was there. When I moved to my mom's, he kind of followed me. They're not living in the household, but we were just always together.
Was he, and you and I have talked about kind of that concept of being attracted to fixer-uppers. That doesn't mean they're bad people, but would you say he fits that mold a little bit? I mean, you're talking about he dropped out of high school. There was obviously some things. Not about being a bad guy, but was he a bit of a fixer-upper? I mean,
no, I would not describe him as that, but I will say that was my first. So when that breakup happened, right, and it turned out he was cheating. We were kids, but that was my first I thought I was going to die. It was bad. It was, and you're like, because it's your first,
first heartbreak.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, how could this happen?
Yeah.
And so that was just kind of my first like hurt. That hurt.
Who did you have to lean on?
After that, not many,
Yeah.
No.
Was there,
So kind of just like keeping that in to myself, right? And then so I would, as long as I kept it in, then I would just move on. I'm just going to move on because, I don't even want to show that. And
right.
So I feel that was the beginning of, I can't show my emotions because, I'm not going to show that weakness.
Vulnerability.
That I'm just so vulnerable that,
But your word for it is interesting, weakness, right? We perceive it as that.
And I feel like the instances that some of these situations have occurred, like it took my feminism from me, and I don't feel soft. Like I don't feel, they describe women as soft and feminine, and I don't feel that.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had to harden?
Yes.
Had to harden, or that you hardened regardless?
Both.
Yeah.
So that relationship hurt, and your way of dealing with it was to build a wall.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because I see you as having a huge heart, right? So I think you may work hard at hiding that, but it's there. But of course, it's different than where you were. So you kind of harden then, you become this person. Was there, and I hate to use this term, but for lack of a better one, they talk about rebound relationships. Did this start kind of that kind of a thing? Was there
I wouldn't say so much a rebound, but it seems like the typical mentality of living in South Mississippi. You graduate, you get married, you have a baby. In that order, or, sometimes out of that order, obviously.
Yeah.
But, and that's exactly what I did, is I graduated school, and my daughter's father, we got married. We had, got our own place, and we had her in 2007. Got married in 2005, had her in 2007, and by, I want to say 2009, maybe 2010, somewhere in that range, then that relationship ended.
What happened there?
So there was no addiction, no drug use, nothing like that. We were young, and I just feel like we grew apart.
Right.
But there was a lot of, sometimes people's personality is just negative all the time.
Yeah.
And never speaks of the good, or, and that takes a toll on you. And I got to a point that I just couldn't handle it mentally. So there was no physical abuse. There was no addiction, anything like that. It was just like, when I say, I know that's kind of hard to take into perspective, but just a negative.
Everything was negative.
Everything
and you
all
start
around.
to feel
and I'm
heavy.
just like, and of course, we don't get married because we ever think we're going to get divorced. And certainly things have changed, and we went to marriage counseling, and things were going good, but he just wasn't one of those guys.
Was he negative toward you? Like, did he make you feel negative about yourself?
Sometimes, and it became an insecurity thing as well. So, we have kids, and we go through this process as women where we put on weight, and then when we get the baby old enough, right, and we kind of want to start putting back into ourselves, losing weight, or maybe putting some makeup on, or, wearing something nice, and then it's like, where are you going? And it turned into kind of one of those situations. And I'm like, I'm just going to work.
Yeah.
Or also in that situation, he had a child prior, to him and us getting together, which we ended up getting custody of that child. But then I felt like a single mom because he was never there.
So you had yours and your
his,
stepchild.
and I'm doing all the things: school, sports, homework, all, anything that.
Was he just working, or was he out with friends?
No, for the most part, I have to honestly say, who knows, but Do I feel like there was any infidelity in that relationship? No. Okay. Do I feel like he was honestly maybe working? Yes, but he didn't put forth any effort into the family.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was a single mom, and I knew that, I didn't want to continue on that track. And another big thing too, so I was raised in church, and so when I became an adult, I didn't really. I felt like I was forced to go to church, and I never appreciated it until I was older.
Yeah.
And so whenever I was old enough, I was like, I believe in God, but I don't want to go to church. Well, then there was a point in my life as, becoming an adult, and I was like, I want to get back into church.
Yeah.
And his response was, you're not forcing our kids to go to church like you were. And so I'm like, man, I can't, my husband doesn't want to even go to church with me. And so our views were not aligning.
Sure.
Right.
And so, I called my brother one day, and I'm telling him, what's going on. And all it took was for him to tell me that it was okay. He said, if you're not happy, leave.
Yeah.
And I never even thought that was an option,
Yeah.
And so with him giving me that validation, like, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to, go.
So you were looking for that outside validation, right? But would it be safe to say that your first husband was emotionally unavailable?
Yes.
Okay. So, I think those patterns are necessary to identify, because again, where this takes us. So you end up in a relationship with an emotionally unavailable person. And maybe it's true to say that in that relationship, you yourself may have been somewhat emotionally unavailable, because on the heels of your first relationship, you hardened, right? So there was part of your emotion that was inaccessible as well. Would that be fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to take a moment to recognize a major podcast sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by America's Thrift Stores, your go-to option for decluttering and giving back. If you have a closet bursting at the seams or a garage that's seen better days, we've got the perfect solution for you.
That's right. America's Thrift Stores makes it easy to clear out the clutter and make a positive impact in your community. Whether you're cleaning out your wardrobe, downsizing your living space, or just looking to give back, America's Thrift Stores has you covered.
And here's the best part. You've got options. Schedule a hassle-free home pickup, drop off your items at one of their convenient donation sites, or swing by an America's Thrift Store to donate in person. No matter which way you choose, you're making a difference.
Absolutely. Every donation you make to America's Thrift Stores directly benefits charities in your area, such as the Home of Grace and other fantastic organizations dedicated to helping those in need.
For example, donations made to America's Thrift Stores in southern Mississippi help the Home of Grace provide support and assistance to individuals facing drug and alcohol addiction. Your contributions make a real impact on their mission to provide freedom from addiction through Christ-centered recovery. So not only are you decluttering your life, but you're also helping build a stronger and more supportive community.
It's truly a double blessing. So what are you waiting for? Clean out that closet, clear out that garage, and make a positive difference in your community by donating to America's Thrift Stores.
Visit America's Thrift Stores online to schedule a home pickup, locate a donation site near you, or get directions to one of their store locations.
America's Thrift Stores, where giving back never goes out of style.
So where does this take you after? So you end up getting divorced, and
so after that, I did date here and there, and then which that eventually led into with my son's father, meeting him and establishing that relationship from there.
Around when was this?
2014 is when I met him.
Okay. And how does this, if you don't mind, how does this get off the ground, this relationship? Because this is the relationship where really a lot's exposed, correct?
Right. So, we're in the world of social media. Everyone's kind of at your fingertips. I had went to a friend's, I want to say it was a birthday. And they were doing crawfish and, just doing things, hanging out. And, he was there. Yeah. And we were... The property was pretty big, and we were on the back side of the property, and we were heading up to the front side, and he was like, do you need a ride? I was like, yeah, sure. And so, hopped in the truck, and I want to say it was like 2 days later, message. Guess who? Yeah. No surprise, right? So it just turned into just a casual thing, just hanging out, and one of the first questions, probably within the first 30 minutes of even having a conversation with him, and I probably skipped maybe an important detail, so I'm going to back up just a bit. While I was, dating and things of that nature, so there was an individual that was my first encounter ever that there was a drug addiction that I didn't know. And so much so, people, obviously they're, if they're under the influence, they're doing weird things. And so I'm calling my sister and I'm like, he's doing this. I'm like, I don't understand. He's out at 3 a.m. in the morning burning a fire. And I'm like, why isn't he not sleeping? She was like, girl, get out of there. He's on dope, And I'm like, what? What's that? Because I didn't know. Like I honestly didn't really understand what meth was or what dope is or pills for that matter, because I just wasn't exposed to it. I didn't, anything that I've had to learn about it, it was because I was researching, but at that point I was like, well, okay, that's what she said, I'm getting out of here. So, anyhow, so
there's a really still a very childlike quality about you, which I love, right? I mean, and that's kind of what we're saying. There's this naivety kind of thing. Yeah, that's okay. So that's great, actually. Yes. I mean, so
I meet him within that first 30 minutes. We're just texting back and forth, and I said 2 things. And I said, 1, are you married? Because, need to know. Done been through there.
Get the big obstacles out of the way.
Yeah. First question, are you married? And he said no. And I said, second question, I said, do you do any type of drugs? And he said no. And me, being naive, is
you
just...
believed him.
Must be true.
Yeah. He said no. Why would he lie? Who would lie
about that?
Why would anybody lie about that? So right off the bat, those 2 things, let me, I don't know where I'm kind of going with that, but it was very important because in that dating scene, right, I had, for the first time ever, had kind of experienced those 2 things. And I was like, man, I don't want to get myself back in that again. Yeah. And so anyhow, fast forward, we're dating, and I get my own place, with the divorce and everything. And so I was, at my parents', and I'm like, okay. So he's like, oh, I'll help you get a place. And we were getting more serious. And he was like, oh, I'll help. And I was like, okay, well, because I was ready to get out. It was me and my daughter, right? And so me and her get a place. Well, he came over and, did some fixing up and things like that. But then he never left. So that's kind of like where that turned into, he just... And then it just grew from there. And
well, let's talk about that moment for a second. So, right, he shows up, does some stuff, and he never left, right? So were you at a place where you just thought, okay, he's not leaving, we'll see what happens? Or did you not want him to leave, right? Was this sort of just a reactive thing for you? Like, well, he's here, I guess we'll see what happens? Or was there more of a proactive, like, oh, I'm glad he's here, right? Which
I wouldn't say so much I'm glad that he's here. When you start hanging out with people, you're with them every day. Yeah. And so I don't know. I don't know if it was like a comfort thing.
I was going to ask, it's now it's comfortable that he's there.
Know,
You're not by yourself.
Right. The company. And so.
Did your daughter get along well with him?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, he was great with kids. He just made bad choices, you know. No, they got along. They got along great. And so early on in that, you know, when it was getting out, you know, oh, Amanda's, you know, dating so-and-so, then I had a few people, you know, they would never say what he did or why. They really thought, you know, if somebody's calling me, they're like, hey, I just want you to be careful. Why? Well, I'm just telling you, you know,
that's interesting.
Be careful. And I'm like, well, if you can't tell me why, like, I don't understand, you know.
Was that early on in the relationship where you were getting those warnings?
Yeah, probably the first couple of months.
Okay.
And I knew, you know, just from hearing, you know, that he may have had a bad reputation, right? And so I'm like, man, you know, so-and-so is saying, you know, why are they saying that? And he was like, because, you know, I will admit that, you know, I did some wild things, but I'm not that person anymore. And so I just believed that he wasn't.
Sure.
Because he was good to me.
Well, you hadn't seen any evidence of the person they were talking about.
I would never know otherwise. And he went to work, and he, you know, there was nothing that really red flags me until later.
Yeah.
Because I think it became more hard to hide what was really going on. And so here he is. Now he's in my house staying. And
when you say later on, how long into the relationship?
So that relation, you know, 2014 that started. By 2015, I had my son. Or I was pregnant with my son. I found out I was pregnant with my son in 2015, and had him, January 2015, and had him August. So I'm like, okay, we're in it.
Yeah,
we got a kid.
Yeah,
and I did want the relationship to work because I don't want to keep starting over. Like I'm having a child with it. Like and of course, obviously, those feelings grew. You care about an individual, right? And so, I want to say I was pregnant when I found out 100% that he had an addiction, that there was an issue, and I had found a pipe, and I had, you know, he was working with a few of our friends, and one of the wives of the friends, you know, she had made some comments about some drug use or something that they were doing at a job. And I was like, why is she saying, maybe her husband is doing that, you know? But I was very keen to, if someone told me something, like, I didn't know if it was rumor, like, because of what he used to do. Maybe they don't know. They're not in our household, you know? And so when I wasn't seeing those things, so it took, keep in mind, I was looking for them. And so I found that pipe. And then when I presented it to him, he said, "Oh my gosh, I just slipped up. I'm so sorry. That's not what I do. I promise this will never happen again." And I believed him. Yeah.
So it's not, if we're honest, it's not so much that there were no red flags. Maybe some of them were overlooked, right? Because you were getting warning calls. There were little things that happened along the way, but we see what we want to see, right?
Right. And because I knew that he had a past, I thought that is why
people were saying things.
That they would say, hey, you know, watch out.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like that was him anymore. I felt like he had kind of outgrown that may have been years ago.
And maybe they just didn't know.
They just didn't know. They had not been around him. And so
you didn't want to judge him on his past because they were.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in the beginning of that relationship, it was fun. Like, we had a fantastic time. We were, you know, doing all the things that I felt like I was missing out on before. And, you know, it was good. Like, that relationship wasn't always bad. It wasn't until years into it that, you know, that it started getting worse because the behavior started getting worse.
Well, so you're 2 years into it when you get pregnant. Is that right? Did I hear that correctly? You started dating
a year into
it. Okay. And so a year into it, you already realize he's an addict. You said at that point, I knew.
Didn't at that point know he was a full-blown addict, I guess you could say.
Just knew he was using.
I just, that one time I had found it and I was like, well, maybe he just slipped up, And
that's all he had told you.
Said he would, I would never do it again. That's not what I'm not, And then he would turn it around and make me feel like I was crazy if I questioned it, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, do I look like I am? Do I act like I am?
You don't know.
Do I go to work? Would I be able to have the X, Y, and Z if I was an addict? And so he would use that and play that against me. And I'm like, well, I guess not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not from what you had heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we ended up a couple years after that, we moved into his family home. So now we're at his place, right?
Now is his family home stable?
So it was a house that, it was his mother's house, and she wasn't living in the house was vacant, basically. And
okay. So it's not like you moved in with his family, just a family-owned home. I got you.
Yes,
okay.
And so we moved in, and we kind of made that our own and made that our home, and, with the intention to raise his son in his childhood home, right? And so from there, that's where we went, and then that's when the real chaos kind of started. Because just... things were happening and I was starting to question things. And
what sort of things were happening that you were noticing?
Lying.
Catching him in that?
Accountability.
Finances?
Oh, yes, definitely finances.
So he's working, but there's no savings in the bank, that kind of thing? Or?
No, yeah. And so eventually, I ended up just handling all the finances because... at that point, I was the only responsible person. So, we're making the money. We're making income. We have nice things. We appear to have a normal life. We have a nice house. We have nice vehicles. We have ATVs. We have all this extra. So, if you're looking from the from the outside in, you don't see an issue there. So, then we have 2 businesses that we're running and operating. But as time went on, it's like I almost felt like I was taking care of a child, and so that was a strain.
So you say you have 2 businesses that you all are running, but are you taking the lion's share of running those things as well?
Absolutely.
So you're really bearing the brunt. So you kind of are,
So
the
now
way
we
you
have
put it.
the 2 kids, 2
and
businesses.
you have a third, kind of, right? The way you describe it. Yeah.
3 kids, 2 businesses.
Yeah. And so, it was a lot, and then realizing that, I can't sleep at night. All I'm worried about is trying to, 1, prove he was lying about something. 2, I'm already having discussions with him about, is he using and different things, and of course, deny.
Right.
And I'm like, if I find it, he won't be able to deny. So I literally drove myself crazy.
Even before you find it, though, are you believing his denials now, or are you pretty convinced that they're not true? Are you still needing to find it to prove it to you?
My mind was so warped. And it was so emotionally and just mentally, when I say it just tears you down.
Yeah.
And then you're like, am I crazy? And then what's
when you
normal?
say it tears you down, just plain exhausted, emotionally, physically, all of it.
Oh, yes.
Done.
So unhappy, feel like I'm not being a good mom to my kids because I'm always in a mood because, I'm just trying to prove him wrong. If I can find it, he can't deny it. And he was so manipulative and narcissistic with the lies and they were so good. They were so good.
Well, and you were a perfect target, right? Because we talked about there's a bit of naivety with you, which is, again, a beautiful thing. I wish that more people had it, but he kind of found a perfect recipient for his manipulation, right?
I feel like he stole my innocence.
Yeah. Pieces of that were getting chipped away, though, even before, right? With these other relationships, yeah.
So, you know, I would always go when we would have a conversation. A lot of times I would revert back and I said, I asked you if you were using or if you were using drugs, and you told me no, and you knew that I didn't do that. You knew I had a daughter. Why would you do that?
And bring all of this into my life.
Why would you bring that to my life, you know? And so all he would say was, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And I'm like, but
now look.
Look what's happened.
Yeah, sorry wasn't enough then.
No,
Right.
you brought another child into it.
Right. And so I'm like, you could have went and found somebody that was into those kind of things. Like, you didn't have to do that to me. And so that hurts.
Do you start at this time making threats? Like, are there bottom lines that you start putting out?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I said, I can't do this. I don't know how much more longer, you know, I know that you're doing, like, when I tell you that I drove myself insane, I mean, I look back and I'm like, I was marking the aluminum foil with a marker
to see
if he was using it. Because if we didn't use it that night and we didn't barbecue and we had no food to cover,
then where's the foil?
And I'm going to bed if it's 10 o'clock and I'm marking the foil, it better have that same mark on it when I wake up.
But
because what would you be using it for?
But when it doesn't, what's the end result?
You know, I only think there was one time that I had actually caught, you know, I was like, somebody's been in this foil. Like, and doesn't it sound crazy when you're looking back, like the measures that you take?
But
Even to this day, every time I pick up a box of aluminum foil, it triggers that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, am I crazy? You know? But there was always an excuse of why he had to use it. Or, you know, I'm going to the store. I'll be right back. Well, the store is right down the street.
Why did it take you 2 hours?
Where you been? It's 2 hours later. We're supposed to start dinner. You were going to barbecue. Oh, I ran into so-and-so at the gas station, and he needed help with
They
this.
needed help, and I had to be there for them.
Or it was every time, I swear it was every time at a gas station. I saw so-and-so, or, you know, I caught him mixed up with a girl. Oh, well, she needed some money. And she was crying. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah. And then it got to where I was constantly trying to find out, who is he talking to?
How many years into the relationship are we at this point?
4.
4?
5.
So your son's 2 or 3?
Well, maybe I got that wrong. Let's back up. When we separated, he was 3.
Okay.
Okay.
So the entirety of the relationship then was probably about 4 or 5 years, because you got pregnant.
2014, 2019.
Yeah. Okay. So at this point, you're making bottom lines. Are you threatening to leave? Are you demanding treatment? Or, you know, what's kind of that looking like?
Yeah. So we have those conversations. I'm like, you know that you need help. I know you need help. I want you to get better. My son needs you. You know, are you willing to go to rehab? And he would say yes. But it was always, well, let me go do this first so I can make sure you're okay. Let me go make this money. Or, you know, he was into storm work and things like that as well. Well, let me do the storm just hit. Let me go over there for 2 months. I'm going to go when I get back. Or it was, I can't go right now because I'm going to miss all the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and my birthday and, you know, different. I'm like, when is a convenient, you know, it was so frustrating. And so there was very far and few in between the actual admitting that there was a problem. And so it was me knowing, battling, knowing, you know, I'm like, breaking down, on my knees, like, please, I need you to go get help. I don't want to see you destroy yourself. I need you here for your son. And I thought that his son would be enough, you know, but, I was pushing it so hard because I didn't want to have to start over. I didn't want that relationship to end. I just wanted it to be right.
Yeah.
Just wanted him to get better.
Because I didn't hate him. Like, again, the relationship started out great, you know. He's my kid's father, you know. And I just want to make it right.
So lots of reasons for you to choose to stay, even though none of the positives are really happening for you at this point.
Correct. And we had the 2 businesses, which was part of my sole income. So if I walked away, I knew what was coming. I knew the repercussions.
So at this point, are you feeling trapped?
Yes.
Where was your brother and your dad during this? Did they know what was going on? Were they trying to talk to you? Like, did you keep them at arm's length? What did that look like?
I did not let my family know at all.
And did they not? I mean, could they not? I know you weren't volunteering information, but could they not see?
I think at some point that they couldn't put their finger on it.
They knew something was not happening.
I think they knew something, but I wasn't talking.
Yeah.
Because I thought I could fix it and make it right.
And you wouldn't have to tell anyone.
And I wouldn't have to tell anybody because I didn't want anyone to judge him. You know.
And there's that kind of superhuman concept of the codependent, right? I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix him, right?
And even if I'm angry and frustrated, and even if I'm scared and I'm over it, I still don't want anybody doing anything that's going to cause harm to him.
Correct. Yes.
That's interesting, right? Because on one hand, that's what you want, but it sounds like you're also in the process of beginning to lose hope.
Yes.
Is that right? If you're feeling trapped and...
I am. In 2017, I wanted to leave then. I had taken a job with actually FEMA and actually went with a few of his family members, and we traveled to Houston and we went to Miami and we worked there for a while, and it paid very lucratively. And so I felt like, okay, if I'm going to go, I need to go now. And I think I even ended up finding out things that he was doing back home. Like I was just over, I didn't even care. I was numb. I was just numb at that point. And,
so you're resigned now, are you?
Oh, I was checked out. I was checked out.
Is your thought process here resignation to the point that, well, this is just going to be my life? Or were you plotting to get out?
I never was going to accept that was going to be my life. I was trying my hardest to get him to get help. I was, we were attending a church, actually campground. They had like a little
revival.
No, not a revival, but like on Wednesday night or something or it wasn't Wednesday, but anyway, it was where people that were having issues could go and talk and counsel each other. And so I was like
celebrate recovery.
Yeah, kind of. It was like it was for recovery or addiction, And I was like, can we go to that? And I think he ended up agreeing to go like twice. And one of the times that we were to go, he would do little things like that would kind of just like drag me along. That
give you a little bit of hope.
He does want to get, and we can, and if I'm good and if I'm right,
if I do all the good things,
then he'll want it too. And what he would say.
So if you could just perform well enough, right? There's that performance piece, right?
He would want to be good.
And if he doesn't want to, then you're not doing right.
He would say, I just need you to support me. I just, you're not helping any, when I would really, we would have those heated discussions and things like that. So, but there's one in particular that I will never forget. And it will never leave. It will never leave me. And he said, you will never know. And I said, no, you will never know. You will never know what it's like.
He was saying you'll never know what it's like to be an addict?
Right.
So he was trying to get your sympathy. He was trying to,
he said, you will never know. And I just shook my head and I said, you will never know.
Yeah, because you had your own pain that you were realizing at this point.
Because ultimately you're just watching someone self-destruct. You're self-destructing in front of your son who carries your name.
Yeah.
You know? And so...
And you can't save him and you can't fix him.
No. And there was one other thing that he had said to me. And he said, I don't know what it's like to be sober. I've never felt what it's like. And I was just like, man.
Yeah. So I can only imagine, Amanda, that at this point in your relationship, you have, I mean, I'm going to be silly here. I'm not going to talk about diagnosing wise, but you almost have two people in you. One's got to be raging mad and the other one is still heartbroken for this person. Is that true? That
is absolutely true. And that's where I felt like there was that conflict, you know, where like, what are you doing? Why are you still here?
Talking to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm just thinking, you know, husband and wife, if one falls off, you're supposed to be there. You don't just let them fall off.
Yeah. Yeah.
To what end?
But it was to the degree where it was costing me my own sanity.
Yeah.
And I know right from wrong. Like I knew everything about it was wrong, you know, but that compassionate side to me was get him help.
Yeah. Right. And then that other side again is now you're angry at him. And I can only imagine you're also probably angry at yourself, right? Because you said, why am I still here?
Absolutely.
Right. You're probably raging.
Absolutely.
And then you mentioned that all of this kind of angst and energy you had that was going towards making him well was taking you away from your son. You weren't really being much of a mother there. Is that fair to say? I mean, of course you were paying attention, but...
I felt like it was draining the life out of me.
Yeah.
You know? And then, you know, CPS is coming because he's done made somebody mad.
And they've called.
And I'm like, who would do that? You know? And I didn't even think all the while in the back, you know, what if he was to owe somebody money? What if somebody was to come to this? Like, I have kids. And I'm telling him this. And I'm like, you are jeopardizing us. And he was like, I'm not hurting you. I'm just hurting myself.
Ooh, well, what in the world went through your mind? What was your reaction to CPS coming?
Oh,
that had to be
embarrassing. You know, I'm like, this is not how I live my life. Like this.
My kids don't get taken.
Oh yeah. Like this is crazy. So they're investigating and, you know, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, going, you know, whatever, complying with whatever they want because, you know, and then so he's making up all these excuses. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, this don't look good. But I was so angry that it happened, but then a part of me was glad that it did because there was no way he could get out of it.
Now he had to get help.
Now he had to address what was going on. There was who you're going to hide it from now. But, you know.
So the kids were never taken.
The kids were not taken, but they did order him to leave the home. And so me and the kids were there. Well, he just kept coming around.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted, you know, he would just, I mean, it was he doesn't do well with authority, right? He's going to do whatever he wants to do and no piece of paper is going to stop him from doing that. So my daughter's father served me with papers and basically reversed our custody papers. So now he has primary.
Sure.
And now I have,
because he's worried about the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And was I upset? Absolutely upset. But I knew what was going on.
You understood.
And I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because I was being a bad mother.
Right.
You know, we have not never really gotten along after the divorce. And I wouldn't say so much was him. There was other factors in there, you know, new wife and things like that. A lot of jealousy, things that were kind of going on. So I believe that he took full advantage. And that's exactly what he did. And so she went to live with Dad. And
But you do understand it to a degree too, right?
Oh,
I mean, on one hand,
absolutely.
he may have used it, but you
Yes.
you kind of acknowledge you would have done the same thing. That's not the ideal situation
Right.
for your.
But what it appeared on the out, I never. There was, and there was rumors going around, you know, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is not true, and this is not true, and this is, this didn't happen this way, and again, I don't think anybody can attest that I was a bad mom. I was in a bad situation.
Right.
And as I'm trying to help him get out of this, or, get him help, I felt like that was kind of taken advantage of. Again, at the same token, I was like, well, it is what it, maybe it'll all pan out or whatever, So not only the lies, manipulation, the cheating, now you've got my kids mixed up in this, ordeal. And I'm like, this is crazy. And so I leave.
You left right after that?
It wasn't long. We had some court cases and things that were coming up. And so I remember kind of after that time period, I think when all that had kind of settled down, we were, or he was doing some storm work, and I left from there and I came back home. And from there, it was like, I had picked up a device that was like linked to his phone, because he had lost his phone right before I had left. And so he had to have communication with the, what did they call them? Monitors, the monitor person that was coming to monitor the work that he was doing. And so he was like, just message off of, it was actually, I want to say Corbin's or my son's iPad.
Is he like in drug court now or something? Is that what they're monitoring his?
Oh, no. So no, this was work. He was doing
just
storm-related work.
Okay.
And they call them monitors. So they oversee, or, they basically just sit there and watch you work. Right?
I gotcha.
And so he had to communicate with that person. Well, he had lost his phone, and he had hooked or signed in with his information on the iPad so that he could communicate with that monitor that was there on that job. And the next day or 2 days after, I came home. I came back to Mississippi, but I had that iPad, and he had ended up finding his phone, but he never logged out of the iPad.
So you had everything.
So I'm at home one day, and I hear something like dinging. Something's going off. And I'm like, what in the world is that? Like, I'm trying to listen. I'm like, I found my phone. I was like, take my phone. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my gosh, it's the iPad. The iPad's going off. And when I picked it up, it was the conversation between him and the monitor, which is a female. And I won't go into what was on there, but it was such a sense of relief. And I'll never forget the words that just resonated with me. And I said, God got me away from him so that I could see. Like, the evidence was there. Like, that was all it took. That was the last thing, was to see, I mean, the minute I left, he was, trying to go to a hotel and see this person. And I'm like, man, I just left. Like, it's crazy, right? And so God put me in a position to get me away from him long enough where I could get my things out safely, get my son out safely. I called my parents. I said, I'm done. I'm out of here. Let's go. They come, I made a couple of phone calls. I had a place to go, some friends that were able to help, and I was out of there. That was it.
Do you feel like your safety was in jeopardy?
Absolutely. I thought he was going to kill me after it was all set. Like, once I left, and there's, no snubbing that, like, I thought he was going to kill me.
So after you left, was he calling and making threats?
Oh, absolutely. I could, a normalcy after that went on for years. The stalking and threatening, he had kidnapped my son. And, people will say, well, how do you kidnap your own child? Well, he did. Okay. He's his dad, but he basically held him hostage, trying to get me to come back to the home. Right.
How'd you get your son back?
So I had to wait 50 days. It took going through the court. I could have went to the house, broke the door in. There probably would have been a fight between him and I with my son there. I didn't want that. My son was 3, and I was like, my parents were like, he'll give him back. he's just trying to use him to get you. He doesn't want to, take care of him. He's not going to keep watching him. But he did.
Yeah.
And by the time that I was able to retain an attorney, because I waited a week, and then 1 week turned into 2 weeks. And that 2 week mark, I'm like, he would taunt me with him. Well, meet me here and I'll give him back to you. So I would drive there with my sister to go get my kid, and we'd pull in the parking lot. He's there, and then he speeds off. And I'm like, this is like a cat and mouse game.
Yeah. It was fun for him.
Oh, absolutely. It was, yes. And so when you get
it wasn't vindictive of him.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he was trying to get at you.
Oh, absolutely. So by the time I retained the attorney and got the court date, because you can't get a court date, anytime soon. And so we got the court date, and when my son was placed back into my hands, it was 50 days. The very next day, when I got my son back, I took him to go have a hair follicle test, and he tested positive for methamphetamine.
Before we go any further, let's take a minute to address the man or the woman listening to today's episode and wishing for a better life. Or maybe addiction has completely overtaken a family member or a friend.
You are not alone. As you may know, the Jesus Loves Addicts podcast is produced by the Home of Grace, a Christ-centered addiction recovery program in South Mississippi with over 60 years of experience.
The Home of Grace has residential programs ranging from 30 days to 12 months. With 2 separate campuses for men and women, they are fully staffed with caring individuals who want nothing more than to guide you to a life of recovery.
Services include individual and group counseling, marriage and family counseling, classes, workshops, GED, and workforce training, all grounded in biblical principles.
And because of donations from the community, the cost of the program is incredibly affordable.
Thousands of alumni from across the country can tell you there is no other program in the world quite like the Home of Grace.
If you want to start a new path to recovery, don't wait. Speak with an admissions specialist today. Visit homeofgrace.org or call 833-55-GRACE to talk with someone.
That's 833-55-GRACE. Call the Home of Grace today. Yeah.
And he was 3.
Yeah.
It was environmental exposure, but
it's still your baby.
People don't realize that when you're doing it, it's on your hands, it's on your face. If he's holding him, he's loving him, it's on your clothes. And I'm sure that there was times when my child was in his vehicle, and if he was sleeping, what more perfect time to get your pipe out and get high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was 3.
Yeah.
How did he react when you told him?
Oh, and I quote, "You must have took meth and rubbed it in his hair."
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh.
This is who you are.
Yes.
How are you feeling about yourself during this time? Are you kind of beating up on yourself? Is there some self-loathing going on, or are you?
No, I was just happy to be away, to be more in control of myself and my situation with my kids, that I got my kid back. But next came the guilt. My son, I want to see my dad. I want to see my dad. Why can't I see my dad? Or crying for his dad. I would still allow communication. So he's talking to him on the phone, and maybe Mama will let you go with me, and I'll take you fishing. And so now, and I'm telling Corbin, no.
You're the bad guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he doesn't understand why.
He can't go fishing with his dad.
I'm just curious. I'm probably jumping ahead a little bit, but how many years behind you is this now? Like, when did all this stop? You said after that relationship ended, there were several years of him kind of stalking and.
Probably until 2021, because that's when he broke into my house and stole money. That I had in a safe, And the ironic thing about that is that the money that I did have in there, I had, scrimped and scraped, and my son's birthday was coming up, and I had income. I wasn't struggling for anything, but I was always very financially responsible. So, I had taken that and just set it aside. My son had wanted a little gaming device, and it was like $300, and that's a lot of money to me. And so I had marked on there, Corbin's birthday. And I was waiting to go get him that gaming device. And so when he broke into that safe, there's no way that he didn't see that labeled. And he took it anyway. And anyway, that had turned into a big ordeal. And he did give it back eventually.
Did you file charges on him for breaking in?
I did. And so when that happened, that was the first accountability that anybody had ever held him to, which led to him being incarcerated. And so he has had to deal with that.
Is he now incarcerated?
He is in custody.
He is now, okay.
Yes. But he's been, ever since that incident, he's been in and out solely on that offense because, you get out, you get probation. Well, then
you violate the probation, you go back.
You violate probation. And, but during that time, with everything that had happened, like, I still forgive him. I forgive him now. I just, it's past. I'm in full control of my life, and things are good.
Yeah,
really good.
What was that process like? How do you get to a place of forgiving somebody like that?
If I didn't forgive him, I would drive myself crazy.
Well, and you'd already been there.
I don't want to be angry. I don't want to have resentment. I want him to have a relationship with his son. My son needs him.
Yeah.
Very much. And I cannot... I do it. My son is my reason.
Does Corbin get to talk to him now?
He does not. Well, I will say that June will make a year that he has had no communication, and not no communication because I didn't allow it prior to his last incarceration. He just stopped calling. It was months and months and months. And then he had gotten incarcerated. And then a couple months into the incarceration, I want to say that he reached out and wanted to talk. And I was like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not the in and out.
Yeah. And so when he did have a stint in prison and he came out, and I was like, okay, I think, he may do the right thing. Or he went to a program for addiction recovery while he was in prison. But looking back, that probably was not the best program. So we did let him, he started going to his baseball games and being, present. Now he wasn't allowed to take him, but I most certainly, let him know the baseball schedule when he was playing. And so things were going good there for a while, and then it was very clear that
he was
still using. And so, you get that guilt trip of, you won't let me see him. And I said, you can see him whenever you want. Just give me that hair follicle.
Good.
Yeah. And there you go. And
I said, I'll pay for it. I said, I'll pay for it. Schedule it. I'll pay for it. He said, okay. well, it never happened.
And that was the end, yeah. And that's the part that's the violation of his probation, is using? Is that?
Well, it should be.
Yeah, in part.
But I think it was just non-reporting, things like that. And then, if they kind of all intertwine together, not supporting, if you have a court order to support and different things like that, and you're just not, he's not keeping a job, just different things.
So where does your own healing happen, right? I mean, so this relationship ends. I love your answer, by the way, to why you forgave. Right? You said, because if I didn't, I would go crazy. And that's, we just had a roundtable on forgiveness, and we talked about how it really is for the forgiver, right? I mean, it's offered to the forgivee, but they don't have to accept it. It's really for you anyway. And so I love that answer. But do you feel like you have healed? How do I ask this? Like, do you feel like some of those things? So with codependence, oftentimes we talk about the radar being broken, right? We don't pick up the red flags. We don't make good choices with relationships because our radar is broken, right? That's part of the codependence brokenness. That's, by the way, a big chunk of my side of the things, right? So, so I can relate to that. So do you feel like you're at a place in your life where, do you think some healing has happened there for you? And where's your life gone since that relationship?
Definitely healing, and still.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I don't think that will ever end for me, Yeah. And I do want to jump back because one thing that I did want to touch on is, dealing with someone in addiction, trying to make things right. Who are you going to tell when you're trying to make it right? Right? Because you don't know who's going to judge you or go tell this person or that person. And then, what if they did get right? Then they're going to have this mentality of this person and think that they're so terrible. You can't, I don't want to.
If they get it right.
Right. Don't want to tell
family. Now they're going to use that. Yes. Okay.
Because now I have to listen to my family tell me,
You're stupid for trying. Yes.
Yeah. And so I didn't want any of that. I was just like, we'll just fix it. And so it just stayed inside of me.
You were alone in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would be your advice to somebody who might be out there feeling that very thing? I can't tell anybody because all the reasons you just gave.
If there are programs or counseling support, definitely go. Because the minute that I have went to counseling and I told somebody why, I was like, I don't understand this. I have these emotions. I don't want to be with this person. Like, why am I so emotional? Like I checked out a long time ago, but why am I so upset? Why do I catch myself in certain situations where I'm just like, something will just trigger me. And I'm just like, man, this is crazy. Right. And so that counselor, that I had saw, she was like, you never got the chance to grieve.
Yeah.
And when she said that, it's like the floodgates opened. And I was like, yes, exactly.
Well, she gives you permission to feel something, and
yes, and she said you had hopes and you had dreams, and they were taken from you. And I was like, yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm like, she made it seem so simple, but to me it was so complicated. And why did I feel all these different ways? I don't, I'm not trying to seek the relationship back. And then, so.
But you did. You had a certain view of how things were going to go, and grieving what your son lost.
Right. And so that was also a big part of it, was like, man, I couldn't imagine not having one of my parents. And now, like, my kid, I don't want that for him. And I think it's so important that, especially a son has a child. Same thing for a daughter with a mother, but I was like, man, I didn't want my child to grow up and have a
like this
void that he's got to now feel. And how is he going to feel it? Because I don't think, how am I going to deal with this if he was to fall into some type of addiction? So I am like constant guard of, man, like, I don't want that for him.
Well, let me ask you specifically in terms of kind of overcoming some things. Do you think if and God forbid, but if a similar situation arose for you, would you keep the same secrets?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
So then you would encourage somebody out there who's keeping those secrets to break them. Tell somebody.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I love that. Yeah. That's, because it's interesting. There's a slogan within the addiction world that says you're only as sick as your secrets.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what I always love is to show the comparison to the addict side and the codependent side. The exact same thing is true for the codependent side. You are only as sick as your secrets. Break those secrets, reach out, get help. It may be, if the addict is to get recovery, and we hope they will, but not everyone will, right? If they are, it's going to be because they are confronted with the truth of the consequences of their choices.
That's right.
Just like the codependent, right?
Right.
When finally those consequences build up enough and the pain gets great enough, we change. We do something different.
Well, and you almost fear that what if. I don't know what happens next if I do say something one way or the other. And once you finally do share your truth and say something out loud, your world didn't crumble.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone else is going to say, oh, thank God, me too.
Right.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, actually, because for anybody listening, I think the thing I would say to that is, please stop focusing on the what ifs.
Yeah.
I want you to focus on, if you would, the what have beens, right?
Right.
And what I mean by that is all you need to know, and you already know this, I can almost guarantee, all you need to know to try something different is that your way isn't working. If you can just be honest enough to see that my way is not working, then try something different. You don't have to know how that's going to turn out. You all you need to know is how it's going to turn out if you continue to do the same thing you're doing, right? That's the definition of insanity. We do the same thing over and over and expect different results. And again, that works on both sides of the equation.
Yes.
Right? And you've been a wonderful example of telling that story, right? You even said it, right? We talk about that definition of insanity, and you said, I felt like I was going crazy.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
and you cannot fix what doesn't want to be fixed.
Amen. Yeah. Amen.
No matter how hard you try, And there was times I would look at myself and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not worth
wanting to get
fixed? My beautiful son is not enough.
You know what? And there's another comparison. I can tell you we've had several people sit right where you are from the addict side and say to themselves as addicts, why was my child not enough? This is the brokenness we all experience, right? Both of them are just two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so also with my son, and, he is fully aware of the situation because at some point,
you have to tell him.
I have to tell him because I can't keep lying. I can only tell him, your dad's going to the doctor to get help.
Yeah.
Right. And so he knows, okay, dad's going, is he better yet?
Right.
And so, once that gets played out 4-5 times, and I'm like, it's time, you know? And so when I did have that conversation, it was like he already knew, but he just needed that to know that those thoughts that he had, that those were correct,
valid and true.
And so the best thing that I can do for my son, and I feel like that at the end of the day he will appreciate, as he gets older, is I always tell him, I say, love him regardless. Pray for him.
Yeah.
I said, some people just can't battle it on their own. And, I said, it doesn't, he's not a bad person. He's your dad. Love him and pray for him.
Yeah.
And he does. And he, no matter what,
he loves his dad.
He loves his dad.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we still, we have our faith, and we wish that, we hope that he does the right thing.
Amen.
And maybe at some point in his life that he will, while there's still time. So, and I feel like that's the reason why I'm so passionate about addiction, you know?
Yeah.
And just to kind of sum it up, just to kind of round this up, I am in a relationship, the most healthy relationship that I've ever been in. And I met that person through kind of all this chaotic time that it just kind of came full circle. And it took a lot of adjusting, because when you get treated the right way, after being, going through the mess and all, I'm like, man, this is nice.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to earlier on in our discussion as to what we grow up thinking normal is, right? And so when you grow up in chaos and you're not cherished, you're not given that's what's normal to you. And so sometimes, unfortunately, when that comes our way later in life, we don't trust it. Right. And what we do trust is the chaos that we're familiar with, right? So we're kind of we're almost
the actual normal, healthy. It's like, I don't know what that is.
Right. The good stuff becomes the red flag. The chaos becomes the open door. Right. And so it gets flipped. And so I really love that. And Amanda, I want to thank you so much for stepping into this. I know this was a difficult step for you, but I so appreciate it. And it's such a needed thing. And I want to just say, I love too that you and your child pray for him, and that your message to your child is he's not a bad person. That reminds me that the Bible tells us that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and the things of this, the enemy in this world, right? And so there are people that do atrocious, really bad things, but they themselves are under the influence of really bad things. They're just really broken. Some of us are more broken than others, but we're all broken. And so, it's that kind of concept, but for the grace of God, there go I. So I would encourage compassion, but I would also caution any of you who are in a dysfunctional relationship, a dangerous dysfunctional. Compassion does not mean keeping yourself in harm's way. Sometimes the best way to help them is to step outside of that, pray for them from afar, break those secrets, right? Another biblical truth is that the truth shall set you free. Right. The lie will only keep you captive. Tell the truth on every corner of what you're experiencing. And I promise you, will it get messy? It'll absolutely get messy. People often don't like the truth, especially when they're benefiting from the secrecy or perceiving that they're benefiting. But the reality is that if they are going to find hope, if they are going to find real hope, a real change, and a real life, it's going to come through the truth beating down the lie. Guys, we love you. As I always say, more importantly, Jesus loves you. Hang in there. Do the next right thing. Reach out, break those secrets, and until next time, we'll see you on Jesus Loves Addicts.